listening to Dudeology, your place for cool stories, awesome stuff, and killer gear. Please like, subscribe, and share on your favorite listening platform. Now sit back and enjoy the show.
This episode of Dudeology is brought to you by Kickin' Nuts. Seasoned corn snacks, kickin' with flavor. They are gluten-free. There are no trans fats. And they are also vegan. They are also delicious. So check out kickinnuts.com or on Instagram, cornnuts.ca, and go get you some. Try some out. They're delicious. You can also check us out eating the taco truck flavor on episode 21. There are something like 9 or 10 flavors of these Kickin' Nuts. So, Brandon, what'd you think?
Yeah, well, I thought that they were delicious. I thought you can take them with you. Maybe if you're going to go, go mountain biking or go out on the trail. They pair really, really well with any ice cold beer. So if that's your thing, a day at the beach, whatever, they're a delicious snack. They're organic, they're natural, they're all the things that they should be. But
how they digest?
Perfectly. I guess like corn nuts should digest. I'm not sure if there's like a way that those should digest. But grab some Kickin' Nuts. And speaking of things that are kicking, we got a couple kick-ass guys in the studio with us today. First and foremost, we have retired Master Sergeant and author Nathan Aguinaga. Nate, welcome back to the show, my man.
Hey, Brandon, thanks for having me back, you and Chris, on the Dudeology show. And it's great to be back with you and your listeners again. Thank you.
Yeah, great to have you back. And we're going to discuss today, we're going to talk a little bit about your new book that you have coming out. But before that, we also have a first-time guest in the studio today, and Lance Sellon. Welcome.
Hey, it's good to be here. Know you guys by different names, but through F3, but it's fantastic to be here. And I've been following Dudeology. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, Lance, before we throw you straight into the fire and take all the gloves off, and Nate's used to that. He's used to getting on the show and mixing it up with us and everything. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Lance, to give our listeners kind of a little bit of background.
Well, in line with today's show, joined the Army at 17, even before I finished high school. Went to Fort Benning, basic training, AIT, infantry school, and spent 9 years enlisted. Went through OCS, became a officer, ended up deciding instead of walking everywhere, infantry, I decided I'd go cavalry, and so I could at least ride places, and spent 9 years as a cav officer. And then about 10 years ago, moved over, since the calling to become a chaplain. And so I thought the best way to serve the Army and God was to being a chaplain, and so that's what I've been doing for the past 10 years. And that's been all National Guard side, and in civilian side, I've been just about 20 plus years of working in the local church. I started in youth ministry and moved up through to an associate pastor. So there you go.
Awesome, dude. Awesome. So Nate, what I heard is that you and I and Lance have all chewed some of that good sandhill dirt at some point in the past.
Exactly.
And what I also heard is that even though he's gone over the dark side and become an officer, because he was enlisted, he's probably only full of 20% of the BS as most field grade officers are. What do you think, Nate?
Oh, I guarantee it. It's good to meet you, sir. Yeah, that's awesome. That you switched sides on that, and then I actually had a couple soldiers that did the same thing. One of my squad leaders that I talk about in my 3 books, he actually he went over to OCS as well, and he actually got out of the infantry and went to the logistics side, believe it or not, and he still got all his badges and all the bells and whistles and all that good stuff. And it's funny how people just transition like that. Like if you were to tell me I was going to be an author 2 years ago, I would have laughed at you, but yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Speaking of things, man, I called you the other day and you couldn't answer because you were substitute teaching.
Yes. Yeah. I substitute teach. Yep. At my local high school and middle school.
How's that, man? How does that go down? Are you did you lay down the law or what?
Yeah. I basically tell them, hey, sit down. keep your mouth shut, do your assignments that I put out for you or your teacher, and let's make it happen. And I walk around the classroom, and sometimes I even walk around like I'm standing at parade rest. I just my hands behind my back, and I'm looking at the students, and they're kind of intimidating, but they love me. I'm really laid back with them.
Yeah.
Well, that's it's pretty cool.
And I was telling someone the other day, like when you read your books, you think that they're going to be, and there's definitely plenty of kind of getting after it, like hardcore stuff in the books. But I'm like, and having spent, having lived with you basically for a year, saying, dude, the great thing that Nate brings to all of this is that he brings that you always got to have like a sense of humor, right? And you can get after it and also kind of cut up with your buddies and have that kind of comic relief part of it too. I think you need to wear your drill sergeant hat though in there one day and just see what they say, just see what they do.
Oh, those kids would be scared. They'd be scared shitless if I did.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, let's get into your newest book. Okay. And I know, the first book was Division Life on Ardennes Street, where you illustrate that decade you spent in the 82nd Airborne Division. And then you dedicated an entire book to roster number 50, which was specifically about your experience going through U.S. Army Ranger School. And now this is taking kind of like a different, I guess, a different approach. First and foremost, where does this book fit into the timeline of your career?
Okay, so that's an excellent question, Brandon. This book itself is like a gap filler in some of the stories in Division Life on Ardennes Street, the original book. And so, for instance, I'll give you an example. In Division, I talk about getting to Iraq, and then I fast forward it to pretty much leaving Iraq. I don't make Division Life on Ardennes Street a war book because I think there's a lot of them out there, And like I said, I think our last podcast, my war stories don't compare to Black Hawk Down or Lone Survivor or American Sniper or something to that effect. So I just I had no intention of writing this book because I didn't want to write about some of my combat patrols in Iraq, and I didn't want to write about that because when you write a book, as your listeners know and readers know, you have to take yourself back to that exact environment. And so that's why I left it out of Division Life on Ardennes Street. And so these are gap fillers. So I talk about combat patrols in Iraq. I talk about my 2 years as a drill sergeant. I talk about more intense stories about Hurricane Katrina relief in Louisiana in 2005. I go into divorce. So basically, it's actually a good book, but it took me long to write it. It took me probably about 5 months to complete this thing because there were some days I just didn't want to open the computer and start typing again. I just wanted to leave myself out of it because it's tough to take yourself back in that environment. But so yeah, that's the premise of the book. I know is based off of PTSD, but the book itself are gap fillers that unites and actually completes Division Life on Ardennes Street, the original book of this 3-book series.
Tell us about the title of the book, Nate. Wake Up, You're Having Another Nightmare. And I know you mentioned PTSD, and I know you mentioned going back to some of those moments. How did you come up with that title?
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Good question, Chris. I'll tell you, I was having trouble with it with my wife, and I was like, what do I call this book? And I said, what do I name it? And I sat there for probably about 2 days and contemplated what I was going to name the book. And it just hit me. And originally I was going to call it Wake Up, Nate, or Wake Up, Nathan, You're Having Another Nightmare, because my wife tells me that usually about 2 to 3 times a week. It used to be every night, but about 2 or 3 times a week, my wife's still waking me up. Hey, Nate, wake up. You're having a nightmare. And so it just hit me. I said, that would be a perfect title for this book. So I took Nathan out of it, my name, obviously, and I just put Wake Up, You're Having Another Nightmare. And that's what I thought would be, the perfect title for it. it fits it perfect.
Nate, thanks for sharing that with me. And I'll tell you what, brother, thanks for having the courage to put this down, right? You're in a book and kind of in the hopes that, right, this can kind of reach some other folks that may be dealing with this same thing. I'm going to ask Lance real quick, though. Nate, you brought something up. You brought it up about the difficulty of kind of having to go back maybe and relive, kind of like some of those same situations that you were going to write about. And the question is to Lance, like, you probably hear this a lot. Like, guys just want to, as dudes, we just want to put stuff in a box and put it on a shelf and forget about it and never think of it again, right?
Right. That's
Exactly.
one of the things I've learned as chaplain is soldiers, they want permission to share their stories, to share their trauma, to share their memories. But you don't get that permission every day. You don't give yourself permission you don't give yourself that permission every day. And so a lot of times my role as chaplain is to walk into those awkward situations and to initiate them and say, hey, what's going on? And instead of just beating around the bush, instead of trying to have like some, soft glide in conversation, most soldiers very much respect getting right to the point and saying, hey, I know something's frustrating me. I know something's wrong. Let's talk. And a lot of times just scratching the surface like that gets right to it. Of course, there's a lot that goes into that, setting the stage for that, being the chaplain who spends a lot of time with soldiers, in many ways have been there and done that so that they know you're not just, preying on their memories and stuff. But yeah, I think soldiers, but not just soldiers, people in everyday life, they're looking for permission to talk about these things, and we don't feel like we have that permission. So.
Yeah, and Lance, you're wearing a T-shirt that says "Do not give into the war within" in veteran suicide, and it's an epidemic, right? Where guys do not feel like they can talk about the hard things in their life. I know you've done some really great video series on grieving and being having permission to grieve, which I think is awesome. And I think this is a needed topic that you can't talk about enough with the, especially the veteran suicide rate. Something like 20 to 22 veterans committing suicide every day. And it's a very serious topic, which is, I think, why we need to continue discussing this.
A recent Time article noted that since COVID, active duty soldier suicides has increased by 20%. And so that 22 a day average, we can certainly understand that that's increased. And it's because of isolation. It's because, one, those people that we normally want to spend time with and share our stories with, we're separated from them as well. And so certainly.
Awesome. Thanks for that insight, guys. And Nate, I'm going to, if it's okay with you, I'm going to read a little excerpt about a story from 2004 in front of the Fort Bragg Post Exchange from your book. And then we'll kind of get into a little bit more about the book. Does that sound cool, dude?
Oh, that sounds great, man. Go ahead. Knock it out, dude.
I'm going to try to do it justice, my man. Okay. From the book, Wake Up, You're Having Another Nightmare. Two of the most insulting questions anyone can ever ask a combat veteran is, have you ever killed anybody, or how many people have you killed? A few days after I got back from Iraq in 2004, my wife and I were shopping at the Post Exchange on Fort Bragg. When we were done, we were walking to our vehicle in the parking lot. She noticed a toy on the ground that must have fallen out of somebody's cart. It was brand new, still in its box. As she approached it, I began screaming at her, "Get the fuck away from it. It's going to fucking blow." I then realized where I was at and looked around as others in the parking lot were looking at me with the signs of shocked confusion. A little over a year later, she became my ex-wife. Nate, that's pretty powerful, man. Tell me a little bit about kind of what happens after that situation, and you're sitting in a parking lot in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and
that's the reality. And like I say in the beginning, in the introduction of the book, for me to write this book, I had to be honest with not only the readers, but before that, I had to be honest with myself. Mm-hmm. And so I had to put that in there. And so that is the mother of my kids. I have a son and a daughter, that adult children now, but that's the mother of my children. And they were just little. I like I said, I just got back. They were toddlers, and we were walking through the parking lot and stuff. And I saw that toy, and my wife, when approached it, and I started yelling at her and stuff. But I noticed that this was happening quite frequently, that I was freaking out on little stuff like that, and I was having nightmares and stuff. But Brandon, you have to understand something. In 2004, if you're an infantry platoon sergeant, you don't go to mental health. You don't seek help in that environment because you're probably going to lose your duty position. Mm-hmm. That was a reality back then. It's not like that now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you probably wouldn't only that, but I would imagine, there may be even talks of early retirement, right? Or again, you're going to be put in a staff position and you're a warfighter, right? You signed up to
right.
fight wars.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I wasn't going to chance. And I just thought it was just the norm, hey, yeah, we're NCOs or non-commissioned officers. We go off on soldiers, or we go off on people sometimes, and this and that. For your listeners out there, I was never physically outraged or anything like that. It was just a lot of nightmares and a lot of times where I would, situations like that, I would kind of like freak out a little bit. It's like, whoa, don't touch that. Or if you're driving down the road, and you see a pothole, you try to avoid it because you think it might be an IED, something to that effect. And it's thousands of us that live that every day.
So your brain is kind of, oh, sorry, go ahead, Nate.
Go ahead. No, you're good, brother.
So you're kind of in this cycle, right? You're in a tier 1 rapid deployment, unit in the 82nd Airborne Division. You deploy, you come back and are kind of expected to say, okay, now you're not deployed, and go be, go do your garrison duties, and you go home to your wife and kids every night. And then, and then you're going to ramp up for the next deployment. So it's like, do you ever have a chance to actually think about what's going on in your head during that ramp up cycle? You're ramping up for deploying, you're coming back, you're down for 6 months, you're going to you're up, boom, boom, boom. It's that rapid cycle.
No, it's 110%, 100 miles an hour every day of your life. So when you get back, you'll do the recycle portion, where you go through your counseling and all that stuff, and then physicals and stuff like that for about a week, and then refit, kind of, and then they immediately put you on 2 weeks block leave. Or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks block leave. And then when you come back, it's balls to the wall. It's you're doing airborne operations. You're going back in the field. You're busting your ass 24/7. And then when you come out of the field, be prepared, because you're going to be deploying again probably within the next 2 to 3 months after that, for another year or 6 months. Or, back in those days, we started off at 8 months. And then it turned into a year. My last deployment in 2008, 2009, it was 13 months when I went over there. I didn't take a break either, because I knew I didn't take a mid-tour leave. I stayed there, kind of like I did in Korea when you and I were stationed in Korea. I didn't take a mid-tour. I just stayed over there. I did the whole 12 months.
They called it, there was a name for that though. It wasn't iron. It was something like, there was some sort of name, like, you're going to suicide it or something, not to make a joke. But we had a name for that. Like if you weren't going to take mid leave and you were going to, grind through it and everything. And when you're 19, 20, you're thinking, I'm going to grind through this because I'm going to get like 45 days leave. And it's going to be epic.
I want 30 days. I want a month off the Army, when I get back. So that's why I didn't take it. It wasn't because I didn't want to break. But then,
let me ask you this, dude, because I know that I think we've all been through one of these. Like you mentioned something about you come back from redeployment and you kind of go through this like cursory, quote unquote, like mental health check, with some folks that are in the Army. Dude, you and I have both been through enough of these, like, check the box exercises. What you're going to say, whatever you have to say to that person to get out and to get back to your unit and to clean your weapon and to go home for the night, right? Whatever it is, right? So, like, are you honest with, like, back to Lance's point, are you honest when you come back from deployment and you have this, like, this mandatory mental health check? Are you just trying to get through that most of the time, or are you honest with that person and say, hey man, I'm having nightmares, or hey man, I'm struggling with this?
No, you're you're bull crapping. You're
Mm-hmm.
you're not being honest. I'll be honest with you right now. You're not being honest. At least I wasn't. And like I said, my wife, when I got back in 2009 from Iraq after 13 months, she was starting to freak out because my nightmares were getting pretty hectic. So she would actually, in the beginning, she would get up and go to the opposite side of the room, and then she would holler out my name until I woke up. And then she's like, Nate, get up. You're having a nightmare. Get up. And then I would get up and I would go out to the kitchen and get a glass of water and pace around for a little bit and all that. But that was the reality. And then finally she said, Nate, you're retiring. You're only doing 20 and out. You're going to retire, and you're not trying to be a command sergeant major and this and that. She's like, I want you to go to mental health, and I'll go with you. And I want you to get some counseling. And so that was it. I was stationed at Fort Riley, Kansas in the 1st Infantry Division. And I went to mental health there at the hospital. And within 45 minutes, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I described that in the introduction of this book, the process. And so, that's basically how it all went down. And, but like I say to you and your listeners, I don't feel sorry for myself. And I don't feel sorry for any adult human being that can take care of themselves. So, like I said, this book is not about boo-hoo, I feel bad for myself. And no, this book here is just a filler of the reality of what active duty soldiers, Reserve, National Guard soldiers and Marines, Air Force, etc., Navy, what we deal with. And I fill in the gaps, like I said, from division life on our den street.
It's important for the listeners to understand our soldiers, our service members, it's not that they're liars when they go through these demob sites and the 2 weeks of demobilization. There's a level of protection that we're ensuring when we go through these stations where we're demobbing, and we sit down with the questionnaire and say, hey, are you having any suicidal thoughts? Do you have any disturbing images that are impeding on your sleep, whatever? You don't want to share that, because the person that's sitting across the table from you, not to their detriment or criticism, it's just they're a person who's just there to process paperwork. And so you run the risk of sharing with someone who has no connection to you, has no sincere empathy for what you've gone through. And so if you volunteer out, hey, I do have some things, it's been hard for me to sleep, I've been having some disturbing thoughts lately, you run the risk of being pulled out of line and being put over in the corner. At least there was a time for that where there was certainly a sincere stigma. And so just want to encourage all the listeners to, you really have to listen and understand this with a understanding and empathetic ear, because our soldiers and service members, they a lot of times they just kind of bite down and bear it, but that's the problem with post-traumatic stress. A lot of people recently they've changed the term from post-traumatic stress disorder to post-traumatic stress response, because they're realizing that it's not a disorder. It's actually how our body, how our psychology, how our mind is biologically, physiologically engineered to deal with the traumas that we experience in war.
That's exactly true. And in the beginning of the book, and right there, actually the first sentence in my introduction, Brandon, I think you and Chris have it in front of you. The very first sentence of my introduction is "Make no mistake about it." And the funny part is, I actually start all three of my books with "Make no mistake about it." That's like my my motto or whatever. But anyways, make no mistake about it, I'm not crazy or mentally deranged.
Yeah.
I do not suffer from this or that or that or this, and nor do I suffer at all. in my opinion. I said, but then again, I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist. And so that's how I open up the book. It's like, hey, just understand, man, the word disorder doesn't mean you're crazy or and I shouldn't really even say it like that, but there's nothing mentally deranged with you. It's just, you deal with life differently from what other people, and mine particularly is nightmares. Hey, I'll live with this for the rest of my life. And here's the best part about it. I would do it all over again 1,000 times because I love this country, and I would do it all over again.
Nate, a question I asked some of the soldiers I work with on one of my social media posts is something popped up in my media feed, and I from like 5 years ago on my last deployment, and I was thinking, oh wow. And so I reposted that, and I just asked the question, would you exchange your deployment for never having gone? And so many soldiers responded to that with, no, I wouldn't trade it. And a number of these are soldiers I've sat down and I've listened to and I've spent time with and trained with, and they've told me their stories, and they've told me how difficult deployments have been for them. And so, yeah, I throw that question out to you. Would you exchange your deployments especially for all the cascading effects that you experience?
Not at all. No, there's no way. No, I would do it all over again. Like I said, I used to be in a group counseling session with global war on terrorism veterans, Afghanistan and Iraq, at the VA, my local VA clinic, when I first retired from the Army 10 years ago. And a lot of Marines, soldiers, Air Force. We had a couple Air Force, one Navy guy. And, we had a guy who was, double amputee, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder. His traumatic brain, he got hit with an IED in Iraq in 2006, and he was a below the waist amputee. And he said it to all of us. He goes, hey, don't feel sorry for me. I'll do it all over again. And it was sad for me. And I write about this in the book. I write a chapter about counseling at the VA. And he lost the ability to read and write. And so he was illiterate through his traumatic brain injury that he got from an IED. And it was sad. So I felt guilt. I was like, why am I here? I shouldn't even be here. These guys are, and when you talk to each other in those group sessions at the VA, it really meant a lot, and it really helped you get through it. And you take the rank out of it. You take there's no rank. There's none of that crap. You just talk to each other, and then you laugh, you giggle, all that stuff. And so it's a good time, with those guys, just a relief, it's a relief.
I like what you said there. Why am I here? The question we ask ourselves, it's like every soldier, and myself included, we ask that question as though we diminish our opportunity to be in those conversations. Like, I shouldn't be here. My story's not that bad. We tell ourselves these things, we diminish it so that we don't speak it, we hold it in. One of the things that I tell myself as well as I tell soldiers when we're doing counseling is you either talk it out or you act it out. And a lot of times just that verbal, people call it the verbal therapy, whatever, but just talking it out in those groups, no matter if it's a big story or a small story, whatever, talking it out keeps us from acting it out. And we've seen it. We know. We've seen how people act it out. We see how our soldiers acted out. Certainly the most cataclysmic is suicide, but then there's all levels of self-abuse and domestic abuse that stems from it. But one other thing I wanted to focus on is when you said, why am I here? And earlier you had stated, you said, my war stories don't compare to others. And, there is kind of this thought process there. And what I'm hoping to do here is kind of expand the understanding for our audience, is to understand that post-traumatic stress is not just combat related. post-traumatic stress is something that therapists and counselors deal with in people who are who've suffered through abuse, who have suffered through things is even like job loss. And a lot of people are like, how can you even talk about those in the same sentence? And so I'm going to reference the Jocko Willink podcast,
Sure.
right? And one of the guys he was interviewing, he said, the guy who was interviewing said, they were, their SEAL team, they would hear how some of these other units, soldiers were, saying that they were experiencing post-traumatic stress. And this guy he was talking to said, at first I used to laugh at that and say, you haven't seen half of what I've seen. You shouldn't be even saying anything. And he says, but then he had an honest conversation with one of these soldiers, and they're saying, understand it from this perspective, that as a SEAL, you have been trained for months and years to experience what it is that you experience. And for a person who may be in a logistics company, even if they've been sequestered away to a FOB or just, run convoys between FOBs, experiencing gunfire, experiencing IEDs, even if it doesn't compare to other soldiers, their training hasn't prepared them for that. And so we don't do anybody a favor by trying to diminish others' post-traumatic stress, as opposed to saying, let me hear your story. And so if you have a story of abuse, if someone that's listening has a story of abuse, a story of trauma, then consider counseling.
Sure. I write about that also in the introduction, like the actual definition of post-traumatic stress disorder. I know they're trying to take the word disorder out of it, but I'm old school. I just keep, but anyway, and I'm not ashamed of saying it either. I used to be. I was like, nobody needs to know about this, but because people, they have that aspiration or they think you're crazy or something to that effect, or mentally deranged or whatever. But anyways, I talk about that in the introduction of the book as well, that, childhood, abuse, a car accident, firefighters. I have a lot of friends that are firefighters. Actually, my good friends in the town I live in are firefighters and first responders, EMS. They see it all. And so, I mean, it can go on and on and on, However, a human being perceives a traumatic incident, they deal with it in different ways. Mine, fortunately, I should say, instead of unfortunately, mine is not so severe where I want to end my life or I want to, where I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Does that make sense? Where, mine is hunkered down to a lot of nightmares and road rage, if you will, which is getting better. But I have a problem being on the highways these days, just like everybody else does. I think
that's just because you're getting old, dude. Come on, man. Come on. That's because you're getting old, man. That's because you're getting old. Hey, let me ask you.
We're getting old, man.
when you're at your meetings at the VA with the Marines, do they show up early and eat all the crayons before anyone else gets a chance to?
Oh, I tell you what, we all used to bitch about the same things, man. Trust me. One dude was like, I almost got sideswiped by this young girl who was on her cell phone text message while she was driving. And, so it's just like you just said, you just hit it right on the head. What it turns into is just a bunch of old guys getting older, mid-age, and we're complaining about the stupid crap that we see on a daily basis around here.
Yeah. Well, you brought something I think kind of on the point of, you don't have to go to combat and be kicking down doors and IEDs to necessarily experience, post-traumatic stress. And
I actually write about that. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I was going to bring that up, Nate, because one of the coolest stories in Division Life on Ardennes, and you reference it, is the I guess the national or domestic deployment to Hurricane Katrina relief.
Sure.
Because you saw some messed up shit down there, dude. Like I remember, tell me a little bit about that and how that kind of played into the overall kind of like PTS.
Okay, so when we went down there, we thought it was all going to be not necessarily cleaned up, so to speak, but we were going down there for rescue operations, you know, because there were still people trapped in their houses. And this was literally, by the time we got down there, by the time the governor asked for federal emergency relief from active, you know, that's when we got deployed down there from the 82nd Airborne Division. And when we got there, we couldn't believe what we were looking at. I mean, there were literally dead bodies rotting on the streets. And you're talking beginning of September in Louisiana. Okay. So it's about 100 degrees out. And so there were dead bodies all over the place after 2 weeks. And I think what bothered me the most in my soldiers that I was with and my commander I was with and first sergeant and all that, I think what bothered us the most was we had just come back from Iraq, you know, from combat. And there were no bodies laying around that long in combat. And here we are in the continental United States. And we were looking at this stuff, and we would go up to the FEMA representatives, you know, and we're like, hey, you know, there's a body on 4th Street that's, you know, on top of a vehicle rotting. Yeah. Well, that element of FEMA hasn't arrived yet. They're the body patrol. They haven't showed up yet. And I'm like, what is going on? And then mysteriously, and I write about this in the book. I write about this in Division, and I write about this in Wake Up, You're Having Another Nightmare. Mysteriously, when President Bush flew over in a helicopter in Marine One, when he flew over New Orleans, mysteriously all the bodies got policed up and picked up the day before. But they were out there for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And it got to the point where we started naming them. And, you know, because like I said, we always try to have a sense of humor about everything. So we were naming bodies. Oh, there's Blue, or there's Chester, the I-10 infester. You know, there was literally a body on I-10 in Interstate 10 right there in downtown Louis. He was in a garbage bag and he was bloated and he was ripping out of the garbage bag. I don't mean to gross your listeners out, but
no, dude, that's real, man. That's real life, man. That's real life.
That was the reality of what we saw down there. Go ahead.
I mean, it's the truth, though, and people may think it's a bit, you know, well, that's, you know, crass to make jokes. Look, part of making sense of the world and with keeping ourselves from going crazy is we have to walk into the insanity of the world and into those situations. And, you know, you hear like, you know, law enforcement has it, doctors have it. I mean, there's this humor that they have to insert into these moments, which help us from going crazy. For me, you know, I grew up, I experienced quite a bit of trauma as a child through my dad was really abusive to me and my family. And so, you know, I didn't really recognize or even understand, you know, post-traumatic stress from, you know, that was residual from that. But that's the other thing about post-traumatic stress is that it's accumulative. And so it's not compartmentalized and, well, what happened when I was 10 stays there when I was 10. And when, you know, my deployment to Afghanistan and then to the Horn of Africa, one of the things I've realized coming back home these last 5 years is, and when I started seeing a counselor once a month was, you know, that's why I get up. My wife drives her crazy. I'll get up about every 30 minutes to an hour for about the first few hours of the night, every night almost. And I get up, I hear a noise, and I walk through the entire house. I know it sounds completely insane, but there's something that's making sure that my dad's not trying to get in, or there's, you know, making sure that wasn't an IED that went off, or there is that gunfire. I mean, it's our body is still physiologically responding to those moments, trying to protect ourselves. And so it may help our listeners to also understand that, you know, post-traumatic stress is one way that our body is trying to protect itself in certain current and future circumstances.
Sure. No, I agree. I agree 100%. Yep.
Nate, you and I have as much dirt as we've chewed together. We've shared a lot of laughs, right? I mean, I think that's probably one of the reasons that we always got along so well. Is we would in the suck we would find ways to laugh about it, right, and to make fun and joke around and goof off and stuff. And we could probably do a whole show about that. But what are kind of some?
We need to.
We do need to do a whole reminiscing show as we get older, right? And more gray and less hair. We need to definitely do that. There's always going to be, and it's kind of a question really to you and Chris and Lance. There's always going to be ways that dudes are going to blow off steam, right? You got to come back. You're probably going to drink. Probably going to maybe you may mix it up. Maybe you want to kick someone's ass, whatever it is. Hopefully it's
right.
You probably want to commit a relationship. You probably want to, probably want to have some sex, like whatever. Like you're locked up for a long time, and you want to laugh, you want to cut up. So, but what are some of the good ways that you can kind of blow off some of that stress after being either deployed or after being like a super intense situation? Because this isn't just, I think this applies to not only guys that are in deployment cycles, but what if you're at a 2-week like cycle in work or 2-month that you're just grinding and going. What are kind of some good ways that y'all found, and maybe Nate from your experience with your group that you're working with the VA, but then also Lance, that you guys like some healthy ways to kind of de-stress or decompress, maybe blow off some steam?
Yeah, I can start. I found, and I've had some trauma in my life where a very close relative of mine committed suicide. It really impacted me, and I didn't even know at the time that I was probably suffering from some post-traumatic stress. Mm-hmm. And for a while, I buried myself in work. Just work harder, be successful, and compartmentalize the pain or the emotion. And even when my wife had encouraged me to go see a counselor, I did, and it was moderately helpful. But what I had found to be extremely helpful was meeting this group of guys through F3. Mm-hmm. And I found that the best way for me to productively deal with emotion was through physical exertion with other men. Happens to be really early in the morning, so it doesn't matter how your hair looks, especially
never does.
Never, not Lance's hair. And so it really helped me to, I found, process emotion through physical exertion and really working hard and doing burpees and push-ups and processing through some of the things that, although it was bodily pain, it was through exertion, it was also helping me mentally. And being around other guys who I can be genuine with to hold me accountable what was going on in my life was way more productive than anything else.
Yeah. Nate, what about you, man? What's some healthy? What should we be doing? What are guys that are dealing with this? What kind of recommendation would you tell them?
Brandon, it's a simple concept, at least for me, and a lot of the veterans that I served with, just to talk to each other. That's about as simple as I can make it. Talk to each other. When we got back from Hurricane Katrina, we were all drinking beer and sitting around, and it was me and my company commander, my first sergeant, a couple other senior guys. We're just all sitting around, and we just got back from a 30-day deployment down there, and we're sitting around in his driveway, and we just started talking about it. I was like, "What'd you guys think about that, man?" And they're like, "That was crazy, man. That was crazy. I never seen anything like that in my life." And for example, and we would just talk to each other, and that's how it was. And then we would just leave it alone. And that's just, hey, okay, we got through it. It was messed up. Let it go, and drive on to something else.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I had no intention to write this book at all. I had no intention to write this. And what happened was when I got home, it was last winter prior to the COVID-19. I was substitute teaching at the school, and I came home. My daughter was in the house. She's a college student at Bowling Green State University here in Northwest Ohio. And she was in the kitchen with me and my wife, and she was like, "Dad," and what had happened was I just completed roster number 50. And I was telling everybody, I was like, I just got it done, and I'm gonna submit it to the publishing company, and blah blah blah. And my daughter, she was like, Dad, you need to write a book about PTSD. And I said, I can't do that. I said, what do I write about? I said, what, my nightmares? And I said, what? I said, that's not going to be a good book. And she goes, no, Dad, you got to understand something. You need to write about it. Mm-hmm. She goes, do you know how many psychologists and professors and in the academic world would take that and maybe even make it mandatory reading material? And I thought about it, and I was like, well, I don't know what to write about. I said, I'll tell you what, maybe I'll start something tomorrow and see where it goes. And like I said, I had no intention of writing this book, but it all started flowing in. I thought to myself, I said, you got a lot of open gaps of combat stories, drill sergeant duty, blah, 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 like I described to you earlier, that you need to fill in, So I think this book that I just wrote, this book here actually is, I think, in my personal opinion, is what a lot of people thought, friends and family, and a lot of people thought the original book, Division, was going to be about, where I talk about personal stuff. And that's where this book comes in. So I filled it in pretty good. And I think I did a pretty good job. Matter of fact, I tell my wife, I call it the masterpiece, because, like I said to you earlier, she's got an excerpt in it where she has her own chapter, where she writes about her dealing with me, and not just me, but close friends she was in the Army with that went to Iraq a couple times, and her time in Kosovo, and her brother who was in Iraq, and her father who's a three-tour Vietnam War veteran, and who still has to sleep with a nightlight on, by the way. And
that's amazing.
So that all goes in there.
My dad was a Vietnam veteran, and growing up with him, and he's passed away now. He was in the 11th Cap in Vietnam, Silver Star recipient. But all I knew growing up was that the VA would just medicate him, and that's all they knew what to do. And with PTSD trauma, was to just medicate, and it didn't solve any issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, could have probably.
It'll put you. Yeah, the medication they try to put you on, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not denouncing the VA. They're excellent. They're great, but they're going away from that. They're going away from the medication. They're doing more one-on-one group sessions where you just talk to people, mm-hmm. and you laugh. You get to curse. You do all that stuff, and it's more of a camaraderie than what it is just, like back in the day, 30, 40 years ago, where they would just give you medication and say, okay, go on your way. It's not like that nowadays.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
It's crazy because we see those times when we see that, it's like giving yourself a Novocaine shot in your knee when you've got a busted knee. You're not really fixing it. You're just kind of giving yourself an anesthesia, right? To just make the pain go away, but it doesn't really make the injury go away. And the injury is never going to go away. So it needs to be treated. And so, yeah, exactly. There's just this big explosion of drug science in 50 years ago with our Vietnam guys, but now unfortunately we learned through their hardships and through the dare I say the failure of that treatment for that generation, and certainly the last 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq has taught us what to do. But Nate, I completely connect with what you said about the things I wrote down to Brandon's question, like what do you do? And it was a human connection, and those stories are so invaluable to share with our family members. Certainly we have to clean them up, but that's one of the things I see a lot with the soldiers I work with is they don't share this with anybody, especially our National Guard soldiers, is because we live in different towns and different cities, and we drive 50 miles to our weekend training assemblies or 2-week or 2-month, whatever events that we're doing.
Right.
And then we all get back to the armory, jump in our cars, and drive back home. And that's where the National Guard is certainly behind the curve with at least the active duty does such a great job at having on-post facilities and care, and guys and girls can connect with their battle buddies. And usually the suicide rate increases once a soldier ETSs because they've lost that community. And so when you come back from a deployment, if you've experienced any type of trauma, if you're a first responder and you're experiencing any of that type of trauma, yeah, Nate, I completely agree with you. Is we have to do that human connection. Funny thing is, though, especially as guys, the average man speaks about 7,000 words a day. And just to put that into context, on average, a woman will speak about 20,000 words a day. And, there's no negative commentary there. It's just, so you try and tell a dude to talk it out when we're already, again, behind the curve in talking things out anyways, right? And that's where things like F3 are so invaluable, because I don't have to necessarily be talking about things to just kind of be sharing the suck with somebody, right?
Yeah, no, that's totally. I got two things for you, Nate. Number one, I think we need to have Jessica on the show, and she can just tell stories about living with Nate in general, not necessarily with PTS, but I just want to hear about some living with Nate stories. And she's a champion, dude.
She will tell you stories of just, oh my God. So she works at CSX Railroad, and she came home this morning at 5:00. They keep switching her day and night shift. She's a manager out there. And anyway, she came in this morning, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I'm just sitting here drinking a cup of coffee." And she's like, "Okay, well, I'm going to bed." And I start complaining to her right away. But she's like, "Do you know what I just dealt with for the last 13 hours?" And they just go from there, man. You all know how it is, man. It's funny. Oh, she'll tell you stories. But like I said, I call this book the masterpiece because she's got her own chapter in it, and I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Then after her chapter, I go into VA counseling. Post Army. So it's pretty cool.
What's your grand master plan? Like if I asked you about this book and we're sitting in here on a show 6 months or a year from now, where would you like to kind of see this thing go?
Okay, so that's a great question. Where I want to see this go, and I just did a podcast, believe it or not, for this book Monday or Tuesday night. I think Tuesday night, because I'm losing track of my days the older I get. But anyways, I think Tuesday night I did a podcast and with Howard Fox. He's a great guy, man. He's a great guy. Anyways, where I think this is going to go and where I'm going to try to push it is these 3 books. I'm trying to get a movie screenwriter to look at these 3 books and push them into a movie based off of the original Division, Life on Our Den Street, because I think it would make a perfect 2.5 hour movie. If you guys got any connections with screenwriters for movies, let me know.
Do I get I know I've asked you this when we talked about our dens. Can I just get a cameo? I'll play myself if I don't.
Absolutely.
Or I could play someone else, but just don't make. I'm
going to make you. I'll put you in there. I'm not a movie director, but I will. I'll recommend you to be the colonel.
Dude, don't make me an officer.
Commander.
Come on, man. All the things you're going to make me, just don't make me an officer.
You got to be a battalion commander. No, you got to be a battalion commander.
Okay. All right. Well,
Brandon, he doesn't want it to turn into Tropic Thunder.
Tropic Thunder.
Tropic Thunder.
I think you've got something really great here, Nate, and I think your daughter is right on. This book is necessary, not just for soldiers, but for dudes and for men who, as we all know, if we only speak 7,000 words a day, most of those are not going to be about how we're feeling. On the inside, we're not very good at emotion. I think I can speak from experience. And so, Wake Up, You're Having Another Nightmare, the book, I think is something that when it comes out, it's already out, or is it early order right now?
It's a pre-order right now on Amazon. Pre-order. The release is November 30th.
Awesome. So in about 30 days from the record date today, dudes everywhere can find this book on Amazon, I'm sure, right?
Just found it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Amazon,
we just
Barnes
pulled
and
it up.
Noble.
Mhm.
So it's pre-order already on Amazon. Wake up, you're having another nightmare. Even if you're not having nightmares, but you're struggling through emotion, stress, trauma, or you did serve and deploy and you've got some PTSD that, we think this book will help. And we think this is a story that continues to need to be told. And get out there and do something productive to help you work through this emotion.
That is what
Absolutely.
we call that, Nate. That's what we call some good action here on the Dudeology show. And what we mean by that is hashtag it. But what we mean by that is, listen, this is what it's all about. This is why we exist, Nate. We're going to do a couple things. We're going to promote the hell out of your book for you. All right. We're going to put our links on all of our social media accounts, and because we believe things like this are kind of what we want to compel and motivate and inspire any dude, right? Whether you're a veteran or not a veteran, but any dude in the world to just make yourself better. Always work on making yourself better, and in turn, making your family better, making your community better, making your friends better, your neighbors. And that ultimately is going to exponentially roll up to kind of making the world a better place. I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but really that's about, if we as guys individually can help one another out, work through some things and get better, right? Then we're kind of putting in this movement of we're going to improve. We're all rising tide, right? It's going to lift all the ships. We're going to.
That is no, that's an actuality. No, you're absolutely correct.
So check it out. All right, check it. Wake up, you're having another nightmare on Amazon, right? Go ahead and do the pre-order. I highly suggest checking out, reading the series, starting out with Division Life on Ardennes Street, Corner roster number 50, and then finishing with this. So probably order all three of them while you're on there. Might as well. It'll definitely help the movement and help the cause. Nate, always a pleasure, brother. Lance, before we sign off, do you want to say anything before we get out of here?
It's just great meeting you, Nate. I'm going to actually contact you because I host a soldier care forum, basically just for our soldiers. Initially, it started out, but we call it Soldier Care 53, and it's specifically to address issues that our soldiers are dealing with, but they may not solicit that support. And so I'm definitely going to be contacting you because this is content that our soldiers definitely need to hear.
Yep.
It sounds good. That sounds good, Chaplain. I appreciate it. Yep. And I'm willing to talk to anybody. Yep.
Awesome. That'd be great for you guys to get together. And as you know, Wednesday, November 11th is Veterans Day. So if you know a veteran, have one in your life, I'm sure we all do, go out and maybe buy them this book, or maybe sit down and have a conversation with them and genuinely care about what they have to talk about. We also want to just say thank you again to Kickin' Nuts for sending us some great kickin' corn nuts. That's kickinnuts.com. And we want to thank Nate for coming on again. You want to wrap us up?
Yeah, let's just wrap it up, guys. Listen, on behalf of everyone here on the Dudeology show, on behalf of Nathan Aguinaga, and on behalf of every dude who is out there just getting after it day in and day out, we appreciate everything you do. That is some good freaking action. Now go get some.
Thanks for listening to Dudeology. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share. For a full library of shows and more information about Dudeology, check us out on social media at Dudeology Show or dudeologyshow.com.